on Sunday morning, so they went out Saturday. And we honestly thought that he was going to be fine. I actually said to my wife, look, you go home, I'll wait here, and then I'll bring him home. That was on the 6th of May is when he was hit. The 11th of May, just after 11 a.m, is when the surgeons came in, asked my wife and myself to go into a room where we met with some other surgeons, nurses, and they unfortunately told us that, again, just after 11 a.m, he was determined clinically dead, and that his life support would be turned off.
My name is Danny Green. I'm a former world champion professional fighter. I was Olympian in the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. In 2012, I basically started the Coward Punch campaign. It was really, my motivation was to try and stop people from hurting others for no reason.
I've been a neurosurgeon since 1997. I've seen a lot of lives ruined by trauma, but in particular, that Coward's Punch, that one stupid episode that changes so many people's lives.
I became a board member of the Stop the Coward Punch campaign last year. I really wanted to be a more integral part of this board in driving the prevention and education and awareness of Coward Punch assaults around Australia.
I joined the Coward Punch board because I think this is a very significant issue for our community. For me, I just couldn't believe that people, rushed up to someone, sometimes they don't know, and just punched them.
The thing that always strikes me with these cases is these almost invariably young men have horrible brain injuries, but the rest of their body is completely healthy. From an incident that just happens in an instant.
My story, so May 1st, 2011, I was out in Northbridge celebrating a win before I was a victim of a Coward Punch, which changed my life forever. From what I've been told, you could hear the sound of my head smashing against the pavement from nearly a block away.
The thing that stands out the most about a Coward's Punch incident is the innocence of the party that's been hit.
We have a lot of assaults that are reported to the police, but this particular kind of assault, it's sort of unexpected, it's not the result of a fight in the street or anything like that. It's
Strike to the head, often in a vulnerable place where the person's least expecting it because they're hitting someone as a coward would.
Then a dead fall from standing height onto the ground, onto the back of the head.
Yeah, dead fall. So from my understanding is I didn't have my arms up to defend myself at all. Unexpected, defenceless, and dead fall, and then I think I lost consciousness as soon as it hit my jaw. Hit me in the right place to put me out of my feet before I fell and hit the ground.
So there are a few different types of pathologies that we see that result in death from a Coward Punch assault. I'm usually the person who will do the brain examination. By far and away the most common is not from the actual punch itself, it is really the accelerated fall backwards.
That one punch sent my son to the ground. His head hit concrete pretty hard. In fact, his friends said you could hear his head cracking.
People don't quite understand how devastating it really is. You know, a car accident, even if you're 100 k's into a wall, if you're seat belted and your head doesn't hit anything, you might be okay. But that sort of dead, I don't put my arms out, I don't do anything, fall to the back of the head is incredibly devastating for the brain.
What young men particularly don't realise is how powerful they can be. And what I mean by that is swinging your fist at the end of a big long lever, which is your arm, is akin to hitting someone with a baseball bat.
A fist thrown, somebody who's unexpecting, it is exactly that. It's a deadly weapon.
As the victim falls back and the head hits usually the pavement,
with the severe accelerated blunt trauma onto a solid object, which damages the skull and puts a significant amount of force on the brain.
the brain flies forward within the skull. So not only do you get bruising at the back part of the brain where the direct impact occurs, but the brain then flies forward in the skull. And all of those areas of the brain are then sheared across the bottom of the skull and hit the front of the skull. Your skull's supposed to protect you, but in this case, because of the velocity of the brain within the skull, actually the skull becomes part of the weapon.
When we're dispatched to these types of incidents with a Coward Punch, you know that you're arriving at a scene with great chaos. What strikes you the most is the brutality of what's occurred, that someone's been struck from another individual and is now critically ill or dead. Once the scene is safe and we approach the coward punch victim, we've got a lot of things to do as an intensive care paramedic. We need to assess them, we need to keep them obviously stable whilst we work out what we're going to do in the next preceding minutes. We will then make some critical interventions. In Victoria, we will put that patient into an induced coma, which is using paralysing drugs and sedative drugs to place a breathing tube into their airway. And that controls their respirations, reduces the pressure in their brain and stops secondary injury for them. And then we need to convey them as quickly as possible to a major trauma hospital that could operate on their brain and try and reduce the ongoing secondary trauma.
So when we got a phone call from the police to say your son's in the emergency ward, he's been hit, you better get here straight away, I thought it was just going to be a hit. They patch him up and we bring him home. We actually went into the room and saw him in the emergency ward, and he was plugged into a machine and he had tubes coming out of everywhere, and he still looked okay as far as there was not minimal physical damage to him, but it was a shock to see him being on life support and not knowing if he was ever going to come through.
They make it to hospital. As brain swelling progresses, they deteriorate from a neurological point of view, and then they're frequently subject to extensive neurosurgical intervention, sort of in heroic attempts to try and save their brain.
They tried a number of different procedures to save him, but every time we got called into that little white room of death and we were told that unfortunately that procedure didn't work and they were going to try something else, until it got to the point where unfortunately they couldn't do anything more for him.
I mean, the most awful thing is the person who has that one punch and they come in cardiac arrest, basically brain dead, and there's nothing we can do. And we're in the emergency department thinking there is another life ended.
Saw my boy laying there. Didn't think he was going to die. I thought he was going to be okay. Everyone was telling me he was going to be okay. Hearing about his head smacking on the ground and seeing him in a hospital, oh my God, that was so bad.
From the scans, my understanding is the right side, I've got a fracture there in my skull, you can feel. Just in the back there's a big indentation from where there was a skull fracture. So that's where I hit. At full force, no interruption in the fall, it was just whack. And that was my head hitting the concrete.
One of the hardest things was finding out he was on life support and then them drilling a hole in the front of his head and then taking the back of his skull off to help him try to survive.
The medical procedure is called a craniectomy. So what it involves is they cut you open from here, from ear to ear, effectively, and they remove a portion of your skull because the brain's expanding from the bleeding and everything else that's going on inside the skull. Having a skull in there, it's contracted and it's only got so far to go, and the pressure builds up and up and up, and then obviously you die from cranial pressure. But the surgeon's forecast for me was that I wouldn't last 24 hours, and told my mum and dad and brother to expect life support to be turned off in the next 24 hours because I wouldn't make it.
Very typically, these cases result in brain death or very severe brain injury for which there's no hope of a functional recovery.
Well, they just said he would either be a vegetable or he will die. There was no in between.
And if I was going to live the rest of my life, it was going to be a really poor quality of life. I wasn't expected to be able to drive, go back to university, feed myself. I was expected to end up in a wheelchair and in a real vegetative state. As soon as I suffered the coward punch, my dreams were shattered in an instant. So I went from being that morning waking up and going, okay, I need to put in a good game today because AFL scouts and recruiters are there watching, to the point where after that, as soon as my head hit the floor, then that was it. My dream was over. When Marcus got drafted, it was a tough one for me to swallow. I remember he got drafted, they wanted us all to be at the house and take a photo shoot, and I remember driving down, I went from work and went to the gym, and I didn't really, this is nothing against Marcus, I'm really proud of him for what he did and had a great career, but it was a real kick in the guts for me that he'd managed to get to that point and go play for an AFL club, and it was really, it opened up old wounds for me. Being one, told you can't play, and then you've gone play at any level ever again, and two, it was going, okay, guess what? Your little brother's going to go play AFL footy and you can't play. Recovering from a traumatic brain injury is a long journey, and then it takes years upon years upon years. So initially that was going through speech pathology at Shenton Park, it was going through OT, it was going through physio, learning how to walk again, just gradually putting all the little blocks, it's like a building blocks I suppose, so you have one block on top of the other and just gradually putting it together. I'm fortunate that I've made the recovery that I have, but I do have a titanium plate in my skull now as a replacement for the skull that was removed. I haven't reconsidered having my skull put back in because I've sort of been through what that would cause me more trauma in the fact it'd be revisiting what had happened and then opening up old wounds. I put gauze or sticky gauze on your skull. It says no pressure, please. So obviously that, like I said about the skull being removed, you're trying to keep as little pressure in there as possible. The titanium plate that's in my skull, it is frustrating the fact that when I go through an airport now, I beep regardless. I get taken aside and they scare me with their wand and then I tell them what I have. And so instead of being able to just go to the airport, put my bags in and not have to go, okay, that's a result of what happened. I have to go, oh, I've got this as a result of that and I have to explain myself. And initially it was a huge fear of infection. So if I were to suffer an infection in any part of my body, then it could be attracted to the titanium plate because it's a foreign body in my body. For the lifetime, I'm gonna have to worry about the potential of a infection getting the titanium plate and having it removed and then put back in.
It's really interesting about being, when it touches you. I had talked to members of the board of Coward Punch, and all of us have some connection to someone who'd been Coward Punch.
I saw a young kid in Rockingham, front page of the newspaper, the West Australian newspaper in 2012. Unfortunately, was hit at a park by a stranger he didn't even know. Both people didn't know each other, the victim and the perpetrator. This young man died, and from there I thought, I need to use my voice in the right way and my profile as a professional fighter to try and reach out to young blokes to get the message to them that I don't condone that behaviour, and no one of my level as a world champion fighter condones that behaviour.
I like the name, the Coward Punch. I think it makes the point about if you do this, you are a coward.
Changing the vernacular from king hit and one punch to coward punch at the start seemed very awkward. It was an awkward term, coward punch. What does that mean? What is it?
It's really important that we don't call these events king hits because they're not a royal act. They're not the top of the tree act. They are a coward act.
Our initial research back in 2012, the term for this kind of assault was still a king hit, and it very much glorified that punch as a knockout sort of blow. There was a lot of excuses given. People said they didn't know that one punch could kill. So the way that Danny Green and the Stop the Coward Punch campaign changed the terminology to it being a coward punch assault, I think it was integral to sending that message to potential perpetrators that you are not going to be glorified for throwing a punch in any situation.
And then over time, it's really resonated to the point now where incredibly, the vernacular in society has changed, where magistrates are handing down sentences referencing the term coward's punch. Police are using the term coward punch in the reports when they're on front page of the news or their lead story on the news that night. Newspapers, syndications around the country are front page to referencing the term coward's punch.
No one gets out of this untouched. The person themselves, if they manage to survive it, generally has injuries that are so significant for the rest of their lives. The family of the victim, of course, has to deal with that again, in many cases, the rest of their lives.
I've visited many families in hospital and been in the rooms not long before a victim's literally taken their last breath. I still had hope. I thought he was going to come through. I honestly never gave up thinking that he was going to be okay until the last conversation that we had, and it was horrible. The ending is never pretty because they're kept alive by machines. They're basically incapacitated to the state where they've got assistance to breathe. And the scene it's full of despair and grief and sorrow and sadness and pain. A week of absolute horror, from thinking that he was going to be fine to then having no son.
So we turn off life support, or we would call it withdrawing care, in really two situations. The first is if the patient is brain dead. So brain dead is dead. The more difficult situation is it's clear that someone's function is not going to be the life that they wanted to live.
I couldn't bear it. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't believe it. I just remember running out of that room to sit next to him and say goodbye.
To see a father having to watch his son take his last breath assisted by a machine is something that I could only imagine how harrowing and how horrific that would be. I have no idea.
I feel so helpless as a mum. I couldn't do anything, you know. I would have given anything to be able to help him. I've lost a part of my heart. I never get to see him. It's one thing I wish. I just wish I could get to give him one more hug and tell him I love him.
There's the ripple effect that occurs with a coward punch assault that spreads very far into the community.
There's an individual that suffers a coward's punch, but the effects of that punch continue out into the circle of everyone that's involved with that, attached to that individual. So whether that's their friends, that's their family, that's work colleagues, people they may have played footy against or cricket against, or they may have danced against, or anyone that's been involved with that person, that coward's punch touches them as well, and those people have everlasting emotional effects.
You think of just myself and my wife and his brother, it goes far beyond that. His friends, my family, extended family, everyone's been ripped apart by this thing.
What happened to me has had an everlasting effect on my mum and dad, for mum especially. So my nana was in Royal Perth as a result of a car accident a couple of years ago. Mum couldn't even bring herself to actually go into Royal Perth and visit her because the traumatic effects it's had on her, they're still everlasting. So you don't ever get over it, it stays there and it leaves an everlasting scar.
Brothers suffer terrible guilt. Why wasn't it me? Why wasn't I there? Why didn't I stop it?
I worry about my son, my other son. That's the one I worry the most of.
His brother, he's struggled, really struggled to the point where he dropped out of school. He's now trying to find himself.
A big one who affected was my brother Marcus. Marcus and I were really close and we always have been. And the fact that I suffered what I suffered, that he sort of lost his motivation. His primary focus went from going out and playing footy on Saturday to then whether it was his brother going to be okay.
Christmas, birthdays, there's always someone missing at the table. And when I speak to my mum, she's like, I can't believe you lost a boy. No one has a right to take a child from you.
You know, neurosurgeons probably have a bit of a view that sometimes death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. The most shocking impacts are people who are basically rendered what we would call vegetative.
It's ironic. I'd said to my mum a couple of weeks before I got hit that if I'm ever in that state, don't let me live like that, because I don't know that I'd said I'd hold it against you, but I'd never forgive you, I think, with my words.
We're talking about someone living in their 20s or 30s in a nursing home.
The people who you might think on the outside are looking like functioning human beings, but in their brain, they're never the same again.
I may sit here and look normal and fine, but I still, as a result, I've suffered epilepsy and been diagnosed with that, so now I have to take medication. So my life hasn't returned to normal, far from. Lost the ability to play football. I've struggled with fatigue at times, and now I have to take anti-seizure medication to ensure that I don't have epileptic fits, so I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. Now I've got to make sure that I'm taking the right medication, which they also have long potential side effects as well.
The Coward Punch campaign invested heavily into research, particularly with the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine.
We've conducted the world's first research on coward punch assaults. We know that there have been over 170 people in Australia who have died from a coward punch assault.
Which is 172 too many.
It was shocking for us to find that there were so many people that had died, so many young men, and there had been more than double the number of survivors of these assaults. Nearly 2/3 of survivors of coward punch assaults had to go invasive surgery following the assault. We know that the survivors are left with lifelong, significant impacts to their mental and physical health. This includes permanent physical injury in around half of survivors, permanent cognitive impairments in around half of survivors, permanent psychological impacts in around 1/3 of survivors.
As much as a result of having epilepsy, I used to enjoy going out and having a drink with my friends and going. Now I don't do that either. I don't drink anymore. Don't go out in the social outings.
The other thing that people often don't think about is fatigue. So even patients who seem as though they're doing quite well often suffer debilitating fatigue.
And then fatigue is making sure that I'm not getting too tired at work, and that affects my productivity at work, which then also, I mentioned financial impact. If you're not productive at work, that can also affect your employment. Generally, people just think, oh, it'll never happen to me. It really raises awareness that you're never safe 100% of the time. It can happen anywhere, anytime, any place, and you're always unexpected when it does happen.
Since the campaign started, I've certainly seen a reduction in the number of attacks. And it is the kind of offence, though, that gets reported. So when it does reduce, you see that impact. And the impact is across Australia. And I think having the research that's been done, as well as the campaign, as well as the advertising, have all added to that success.
What we're doing and what we have been doing is working, because the amount of deaths since 2012 to 2018 has declined.
We found that there was a drop in deaths of around 50% since our original research. So you can see that with this increased education and awareness, all of these prevention strategies put in place, it's really working. We're saving lives.
So the person that perpetrates a coward's punch is not immune from the cascade of this trauma. They're just not injured.
This is, a split-second decision that is on your conscience for the rest of your life and has legalities associated with it for you and for your family.
I don't think I would ever be able to forgive. He took away my son, and my son had a whole future left ahead of him.
Once they realise what they have done to an individual, either taking their life or causing such severe disability for the rest of that person's life, that has to have a cascade into how they are going to go on in the rest of their life as well. They've stolen someone's independence.
Someone's come into my life and taken something from me, stolen me, something out of my soul. It's the cruelest thing.
People shouldn't get away with this kind of behaviour or think they're going to get away with it. The police will go looking for you and you will go to jail.
You lose all your liberties. You have a criminal record that will stay with you for the rest of your life.
But if you're a young person, the first 10 years of your working, education, getting married, having a baby life are spent in jail, I'm not sure you ever really recover from that.
Think about what it's going to be like sitting in a jail cell, not being able to do what we all love to do, and that's just be free. But also think of the shame and the guilt that you're going to bring your family and your friends and yourself.
He's got to look at himself every day in the mirror. I can't forgive. Maybe he could tell a story to somebody else so somebody else doesn't do it.
Family and friends will shun you. That's what happens to people when they commit these kind of offences.
It's a question to people who are around someone who is about to do a coward punch, whether it's a girl or a guy. The friends have a large role to play in preventing coward punches.
And you need to look out for your mates and go, I know that they get a bit loose when they've had a few drinks, or they get angry really easily and they're likely to lash out, and step in and stop a coward's act, because that's a brave person act.
Whether it's pulling your friend away or just going, oh, let's go, this is not worth it, and really they're not worth it.
1 second for a mate to pull that person aside and say, stop it. That's all it would have took on the night that Jaden was hit. Grab his arm and let them go their different ways. But instead he chose to punch, and as a result, I've lost my son.
My message to someone who hits someone with a coward punch either in the street or on a sporting field is really a question. The question is, how would you like it if that was your father, if that was your son, if that was your brother? How would you like it if someone did that to one of your loved ones? Pretty sure I know the answer.
Don't let this happen to your family or somebody else's family. It's forever. It's not from a little moment of time, it is forever.